according to my uncle who very clearly works at Nintendo, we are in fact getting a new gimmick for Generation 10, and yes, it is microtransactions. Now we can get a fourth evolution for the small price of $5.99 per Pokemon. Hey, what's good, Joe? Soul here, and welcome back to the story mode. So, it seems the tank has not run out just yet on stuff we can potentially talk about in regards to Pokemon Winds and Waves. Although we still have probably over a good year until we finally receive this game, I think that it's pretty fair that we go ahead and just blurt out some ideas every now and again. Who knows? One of us might be right. But it seems likely we won't know if we're right until probably February of next year, if we're going based off of how we received news for Legend ZA. But hey, as I've made very clear, fine by me. As long as they're working hard and diligently on making this game as high quality as possible, I'm down to wait. Now, getting into the meat of things, almost a month ago now, I actually asked you guys what you guys thought the gimmick was gonna be going into Pokemon Winds and Waves. So, it seems that not a lot of people either completely understood what I was asking here, or didn't really have too much interest in trying to guess what kind of gimmick we would have. And you know, after sitting on that very thought for a couple of weeks, fair enough, understandable. I can definitely see why this one definitely wasn't as responded to, but that's okay. We're still kind of gonna find a way to make this work. Between the Discord and the YouTube, I think we got a solid amount of responses, so I think we're good to go for the most part. But of course, we gotta make sure to let everybody know that this is far from the last time we're gonna do something like this. So if you wanna make sure that you get your responses responded to, then you've got one of two options. Either make sure to join up in the Discord where you could respond to my prompts there in the video tabs area, and you will get your responses prioritized. And of course, if you have any ideas on what kind of videos you would like for me to make, you could also put that in the video ideas tab. Or alternatively, you could hit that little sub button and make sure to turn on notifications so that when I do put something in the community tab on YouTube, you can respond there. That being said though, I think we've yapped enough, so why don't we go ahead and start getting into things. Why don't we kick things off with the Discord side? Let's kick things off with the homie Ruby, who says, honestly, I'd say for a gimmick in Pokemon, it would have something interesting to do with the region, like terrestrialization in Scarlet and Violet. So maybe something to do with using the winds or waves to time attacks and double battles within areas where winds or waves are just right. I guess slight spoiler warning. I think it's just kind of funny based on what I've read. We all seem to have a general idea that winds and waves does actually have to do with the gimmick in of itself, and that is really interesting to me. I kind of like the idea that there's this consensus going around that weather is going to heavily affect how we go about battle this time around. But I think what's interesting about this idea is the fact that since we are going underwater, you could be onto something in which there could be a situation in which tides or currents or something like that could possibly heavily affect how we go about battle under there. And that's super interesting. You could call me crazy here, but now that I'm thinking about it, there is a slight possibility that we could be looking at the best reason we've ever had to buy both versions of a Pokemon game. Pokemon Winds could be affected by the breeze, Pokemon Waves could be affected by the sea. Bars! Even more ridiculous, they could easily pull a Pokemon Black and White situation where the winds is actually more effective in Pokemon Waves and vice versa. Right? That could be fun. Just a little stupid thing, because why not? Overall, I think that this was a very good kickoff to get us into the right headspace of what to expect when talking about something like this. After that, we got the homie Ren, who says, my idea has something to do with terrain. Maybe it's just me having a lot of fun recently messing with weather teams and champions, but I would love something that makes it so that the terrain you're fighting on impacts the way you fight. Maybe, although that might be hard to implement when it comes to competitive, because you can't really change where you fight in an online match. Another idea I have is weather forms instead of terrain changes. How you fight with certain Pokemon makes them change forms in weather, like Cast Form, though it would require an item that cannot be stolen because that's what makes Cast Form special. This would definitely make sense for a game titled Winds and Waves, and it would be a good excuse to add more weather and terrain options. So for the most part, I'm kind of in agreement with what you said in regards to weather form changes. That's kind of that's kind of Cast Form's entire flow. You take that from him and that boy is chopped liver. So I don't know how they would go about that without like majorly buffing the entire ability, or just like, I don't know, just doing something very, very specific with Cast Form. I feel like Cast Form could be a major player in something like Winds and Waves. Obviously, Cast Form is going to be an available Pokemon here, so I wouldn't be shocked if they did something special with him with that as a mechanic. But regardless of that, I think that the terrain idea in of itself is a more viable idea, for lack of a better way to put it, only because it is something that we have kind of seen before. We have seen it, well, actually, you know, obviously we haven't seen it in like modern actual Pokemon or anything like that, not in the official franchise, but we have seen it done in fan games. I think I have brought this up before, but an older fan game, I think it's finished now, called Pokemon Reborn, utilized terrain changes, and they were so dangerous and scary, but if you took advantage of it, oh my god, it was crazy to play around. But the only thing about terrain changes that's kind of odd is that it kind of gives the exact same idea that terrestrialization has, in which it buffs one singular monotyping very specifically, but now it's to like the whole area as opposed to just one Pokemon. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in a way, if you want to think about it that way. Kind of a trick room situation where if somebody's playing their cards right and they predict you, they can definitely use that against you. But I guess at the same time, that could definitely be a massive benefit to the game. Obviously, one of the things that's most important about turn-based battling is the strategy that you can implement. So if they could find a comfortable way to implement terrain changes that could affect how powerful Pokemon are in battle to that degree, kind of like Reborn. Obviously, I know they wouldn't do it the exact same way. They would tinker with it and make it a little more balanced and fair. But if they could find a way to make it work, I'd be down, you know. But again, it's kind of similar to terrestrialization in that way. So I'm not entirely sure how they would go about that. But I don't know. I like the concept either way. After that, we got the homie Big Ladian, who says, Terra moves. Flying Press is still the only dual type move. What if the Gimmick allowed for any move to be dual type? If the Gimmick type is different than their stab type, then all stab moves get the Gimmick type added. If the Gimmick type is stab, then all non-stab moves get the Gimmick type added. Some issues people have pointed out with it though is that it might be too confusing for younger players, or that it might be difficult to make it look like a spectacle in battle. I definitely do like this concept a lot. This is something I've thought about too, especially because exactly as you said, like there are no dual type moves. I feel like moves should be the next major focus for the Gimmick to surround. I think it would be a lot more interesting that way to be able to play around with. You never know what people are going to be rocking that way, and it's going to be so much more secretive and so much more scary, but all the more interesting to see in battle, especially if all of the Pokemon on your team are able to use it. But I don't know, that's definitely something to play around with. Of course, there is a little bit of nuance there to be played around with when it comes to how stab is affected. I do feel like what you said here is very good, and I feel like it's not too horrifically adjacent to that of terrestrialization and how that works, in which even though the Pokemon becomes a different typing, they can still use stab moves from their original typing as well as the new one that they gained from terrestrialization. I imagine it would work in a very similar fashion with moves. We would also definitely have to consider like what the damage output would end up looking like on these moves as well. I feel like we'd be looking at another similar Z-move situation in which it's just busted as hell. So I don't really know how we would go about Terra moves exactly. I think the way that you put it here is very solid, although like you said, there is a little bit of a concern with confusion for children and just making it look good and more interesting than just slapping a second typing onto the move in of itself so that you see it in the menu. There's probably going to be a little bit more of a showcase to it every single time whenever it's utilized. I imagine that they would want to put a little more oomph, a little more hoopla into the spectacle, you know? But generally speaking, I think that they could find a fun way to implement Terra moves. This is fire. Next, we have a Hydrator. All right, bro, you know what? Today, you win. You get the entire thing read, because we don't have nearly as many comments to sift through this time around. So we got a little extra space for you. So let's lock in. Let's see what you got to say. I feel like something like Loxton's Cascade Region gimmick would fit Weewah well. In case you don't know, the gimmick of Loxton's Cascade Region is called Weathergy, Weather Energy, where every type has its own weather, and there are like 3 or 4 weather categories in which each category can mix and make a new type of weather with new effects. Definitely recommend the watch. But reusing someone else's idea is boring, so I'm coming up with something new. I think that Pokemon fusing with items like Zacian and Zamazenta did would be pretty cool. There could be a larger set of items that could initiate these form changes and to limit it once per battle. There could be a key item you could give to a Pokemon. It could be called the Item Catalyst or something like that. To use the ability of object splicing, I've decided to call it, you need to hit a button in the fighting menu and a list of those usable items would pop up. Essentially, these items would slightly change the appearance of the Pokemon, like adding a coat or a helmet to the model, and the item would give the Pokemon an extra ability as well as add some stats. A shield could boost defense base stats and lower speed, as well as giving an ability like every time the opposing Pokemon lands an attack, there's a chance of damage reduction by up to 50%, as well as causing 20% of the reduced damage in recoil, or something along those lines. Another item could make your Pokemon immune to status moves or boost the effect of status moves. So like a burn could also have special attacks or do more damage per turn. Poison would always be badly, and badly poison would start at a higher percentage, etc, etc. I think this could have a lot of potential. I'm not a competitive player, so I have no idea if this could be balanced or not, but to me it sounds like a lot of fun and an intricate gimmick that could make the competitive scene a lot more strategic. Now, I have to imagine that if I were a more competitive player, I would probably imagine this as a masterclass, just absolute disaster of a nightmare to deal with as a mechanic, because you would never know who's using what kind of repeat items could work, what kind of things would need to be banned. It would just be absolute hell to deal with in competitive. But as a casual player, Hydrator, this is the one. This one is so much fun. I love this concept. Holy hell. There's so many things that you could play around with when it comes to that concept. It's so endless. Literally, I just thought of an idea of giving like Urshifu or something a paintbrush, right? And the idea is that every time it hits an opponent with a physical attack, it would like blind the opponent because, you know, he's using a paintbrush, and it would lower accuracy and stuff like that. That's so fun. I feel like, again, that would definitely need to be balanced, but on paper, this is perfect Nintendo Pokemon shenanigans right here. I love this concept so incredibly much. The only problem we would have in this particular instance is I don't know how well it would fit to the theming of Pokemon Winds and Waves. I feel like they're a little more particular with that general concept, but obviously, you know, the idea here isn't to, you know, exactly narrow down what we could be getting. It's just general ideas of what could be possible, and I don't see this as something that's impossible, just something that's unlikely for this game in particular, but definitely something that we could absolutely see down the line as a fun little mechanic to splice Pokemon with objects, and we could get like very specific mixtures to make Pokemon look even cooler, and we could get really awesome abilities and unique outcomes from those splices. I think that could be such a fun concept. You cooked with this one. Absolutely. But I definitely do need to sit down with the Lockstin video and see what kind of mechanic he's working with here. Maybe that could be something that's very relevant to Winds and Waves in particular. So I don't know. I'll give it a shot, but I do like the general idea that's presented there. But overall, very solid. That was awesome. After that, we do have the Dragon Scale box here, and buddy, I think you misunderstood the assignment completely. You gave me like a full wish list of just things you generally want from Pokemon. I had to reread this first one a couple of times because I was like, wait a minute, that's not a gimmick. That's just something you want. Out of fairness though, I'll read the first one because you did respond in the Discord, but you know, the other ones are just a straight up wish list. We can definitely do more of those getting closer to Winds and Waves for sure, but we'll read this one for now. Give cross-gen evolutions. Jinx, Magcargo, Kecleon, Dredagon, Grapploct, please don't ruin the design, and maybe Dreadnought, which might break the game with better stats on top of Shell Smash and Swift Swim, and my life will be yours. Also, knowing Game Freak and 2-stage stone evolutions never getting evos, I think stuff like Sunflora, Helioisk, and the Simi Monkeys are a lost cause. This is why Scovillain got a Mega, unless they say F it and break the rules. I mean, yeah, I'm down for most of what you've listed here as far as, you know, getting newer evolutions and stuff like that. There's definitely other Pokemon I would choose first to get newer evolutions. I mean, Jinx is just a little dated, so I guess I could definitely see that. Kecleon definitely deserves something new. It's about time Kecleon got something new. I mean, Dreadnought is pretty good as is, you know what I'm saying?
Ouch.
But we did see some cool ones in Generation 9 with Annihilate and King Gambit. Definitely could use a couple of more though. We only did get like a little handful there, but would love to see what they do in Winds and Waves with some more cross-gen evolutions. Maybe we could get something insane for Whalmer, who knows? But yeah, that was semi-detached from the conversation we were having prior. So why don't we go ahead and get back on track and end things off on the Discord side with Devesta, who says, obligatory voice acting requests. I think a unique idea that I've had in my head that I like that also fits with the name Winds and Waves is a gimmick around switching, changing winds and moving with the flow of the ocean. Putting a gimmick that puts important of switching could also make them inadvertently create more challenge, which we can all agree Pokemon needs more of, since NPCs rarely ever switch Pokemon. I kind of get what you're saying here. I feel like making something more interesting when it comes to the switching mechanic in of itself could have a fun role to play. I don't know what kind of specifics we could get into with that, but I mean, I do get the general gist of the idea. Maybe it could be something more automatic. Maybe if we have a more common situation like double battles or triple battles, maybe like swapping sides and stuff like that could be something that could play into strategy. But I don't know. I don't think they would make a mechanic solely on that, only because like how would it work online, especially in like Champions when they inevitably add whatever gimmick we end up getting? I don't know, but I do see where your head is at with that, and I do think it would definitely have to be something that aligns with the thought process of Winds and Waves. But yeah, I could see it for sure. That just about wraps it up for the Discord side of things. Again, if you would like the opportunity to have your responses prioritized, make sure to join up in the Discord so that when I do ask for your guys' opinions to respond to prompts, you could get your response in there, and it will most likely end up in the video like 99% of the time you respond there. That's just usually how it goes. But for now, why don't we go ahead and check in with the YouTube side of things. Let's kick things off with the dude Rock Owl, who says, I prefer turn-based because it can make me think each turn. However, singles is getting kind of boring. Maybe they could make double battles like how Colosseum did. Another change that could work is working like Temtem with moves, not using PP, but utilizing stamina. I was invested in Temtem because the battles made me consider which moves I used with the limited stamina I had without losing a turn due to exhaustion. TLDR, Temtem's battle mechanics could work for Pokemon, but I doubt it will happen thanks to Pokemon's stubbornness. So I personally have not played Temtem, so I don't know how this mechanic works exactly, but I imagine based on what you said that it works kind of something akin to Persona, where we have our little MP bar where we use very specific moves and we have to be very careful with those moves while we're in, you know, a dungeon or in a labyrinth or whatever, because the more you use that magic, the less you have to actually attack with, and then you have to leave the dungeon for a day and get your resets in. And I imagine it would be a very similar situation with Winds and Waves, in which you would have this very limited stamina in battle and you have to be very careful about how you go about it. I don't know if this stamina meter would be like connected to the entirety of the team, or if it would just be each individual Pokemon, because that would definitely change how people play around with things. But I feel like that would be a very good incentive to, you know, switch around more often and utilize other Pokemon throughout the entirety of the battle. But I don't know, I think that could have a little bit more nuance and depth to it if really played with. Again, I'm sure it works very well in Temtem. Maybe I just have to check out how the mechanic works there, and maybe I'll have a better idea of it, but I do like the general concept of it because, again, you know, I'm a Persona fan too, so I think I have a general idea, but hey, I could be wrong on that. After that, we got It's a Nekowo, who says, I'd love to see a Yu-Gi-Oh! Star level Magic Hearthstone mana system. It seems Game Freak already categorizes moves together like Flare Blitz and Wave Crash, etc, etc. Put a power level on every attacking move, and as the game goes on, you earn mana to use the higher tier moves. So you can't open the gate with Draco Meteor, you gotta earn it through the gimmick or do power increases as we go. As dumb as it sounds, like Black Ops Cold War zombie perks. The more perks you buy, the more expensive. The longer the match, the more powerful we become, the harder moves hit. I have not played Cold War, but I have played Black Ops and I have played zombies. Are we referring to Pack-a-Punch? Is that what we're talking about? As far as like perks and upgrading like certain weapons and stuff like that, in this case it would be what? Certain moves we have to utilize. So like every turn we would do like a hit or something like that, and we would charge up like a meter or something like that, and once that meter's charged up, we can apply that to a specific move or something. Is that what we're getting at here? I have also not played much Yu-Gi-Oh! And I've played one game of Magic the Gathering. I do eventually plan to get into it so I can get those damn Sonic cards and Final Fantasy cards, just because that's all me. But regardless, I do think that this is a very interesting concept. I think it could work if battles were to go on longer. I think that's the only scary thing about this mechanic, is that usually battles don't go on long enough in like casual until like late game. So like 9 times out of 10, you're not really utilizing the mechanic nearly as much as you probably could have, unless it's like a gym battle. But then again, I guess it's not all that different from how we usually end up utilizing these mechanics. We had the same situation with like Mega Evolution, where you never really needed it early game, or even against like generic NPCs and stuff like that. Z moves, it would be kind of a waste, etc, on and on. But if that's, you know, the mechanic that you're describing here, if I described it right, I mean, go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I have the wrong idea about how it works, but I imagine if it works something like Pack-a-Punch, but in a turn-based battle instead, where you're like fighting to earn those points and utilize those to power up moves as you go, then that could be extremely scary. It's almost like a consistent free like swords dance or something, you know what I'm saying? So I don't know, that could be a very interesting way to go about it. After that, we have Dante, who just simply left Spirit Evolution as the gimmick. So the idea here is that it's supposed to work something akin to Ash Greninja, where straight up your bond with the trainer causes a new level of transformation. But instead of a Mega Evolution, it's a Spirit Evolution, in which, you know, they gain much more of a stronger connection to the trainer. But I feel like, you know, that's still very akin to just Mega Evolution. But I mean, it's still a very cool concept. It's kind of crazy that we never really got Ash Greninja back to, you know, a greater degree, and more Pokemon didn't have stuff like that. I feel like definitely some Pokemon deserve to have, you know, if they had a strong bond with their trainer, they could surpass that of Mega Evolution and introduce a new evolution entirely, that being Spirit Evolution. I feel like maybe down the line, if we get another sequel to Generation 6 or even Gen 7 and stuff like that, and we reintroduce Mega Evolution or something, maybe we could get something akin to that. Don't know if it would fit with the general themes of Winds and Waves, but I do like the concept of Spirit Evolution, assuming that's what you meant. Following that, we've got the homie Victoria Steele, who says, I'd like to see a proper rival, not a travel buddy and an evil team, not some misunderstood good guy who is evil, quote unquote. As for gimmicks, a weather one could be interesting, so could a stat-based one, akin to Deoxys forms, attack, defense, speed, same BST, just shuffle between the stats maybe. One last thing, I hope they keep the HMs from ZA, using one of my 15 moves to get rid of a giant rock blocking the way is good, blocking places that are too high level that can be gotten around with loads of moves instead of a singular, generally shit HM, sign me up. Okay, so we're just out here cheating. we got a wish list here again. Victoria, but I mean, it's okay. At the very least, you still applied the general idea of the conversation in this, but y'all some cheaters, man. But regardless, I definitely agree that it's time that we got a proper rival, one that's a little bit more ingrained into the story in of itself, somebody that is more flexible, that can be maybe morally questionable in how they go about you know, the plot and story, and you know, how they go about opposing you and stuff like that. I would definitely love to see a more interesting character in that regard. I do love characters like Nemona, like Hao and stuff like that, but I feel like because of that, you know, they're not as, I mean, they are still good rivals, you know, I still like them, but I feel like a more interesting rival would be willing to do more to defeat you. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know. It depends on how you play it. And same with the evil team situation. I think I talked about this specific topic in a previous video not too long ago, like last month or something like that. So I definitely agree on that front. And then, yeah, as far as like weather gimmicks go, I think it just kind of makes sense thematically for Winds and Waves, excuse me, whoa, what the hell, where we could have some major like form changes or stat changes based on what we see with Deoxys as an example, or, you know, more accurately, like more closely, cast form, and how that utilizes weather changes and stuff like that. So I don't know, that's definitely something we could end up playing around with. I imagine it is going to be something weather related or terrain related. It's really hard to say as of right now, it's just so early, but I think everybody has a general similar idea in what they would like to see thematically with a weather-based mechanic. And then, like you said, like it would be really, really cool to continue utilizing the HM quote-unquote situation that we have in the Legends titles. The way that we have it laid out in those games make it a lot more bearable and a lot more interesting to get around the world. And as a opposed to like, you know, waiting to get a certain ability or a very specific thing. Most of the time, you know, if you need to get around a rock or around like a gloop of muck, whatever. I got hiccups, I'm sorry. You use actual moves that any of your Pokemon have access to. Following that, we've got the Regional Variant Master, who says, given that we have had gimmicks who mess with evos, moves, HP, and typing, what they have left to mess with is weather, items, and terrain, so I am guessing those will be the next 3 gimmicks. That kind of makes sense, unless they implement a brand new mechanic into the entirety of Pokemon that we have yet to see. It's kind of hard to imagine what else they could do, unless they like rewind time a little bit and just go back to the drawing board from frame 1, you know, and just mess with evolutions again or something. But I feel like they wouldn't do that. I feel like they're dipping their toes more into more tactical aspects of unique gimmicks and stuff like that, so that we could get a little more unique with it, and we're not limited to just very specific Pokemon. Like, they made it so that terrestrialization works with pretty much any Pokemon, so you could come up with an endless number of strategies if you are tactical enough about it, and stuff like that. Obviously, there are situations in which, with Mega Evolutions, Z moves, and Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing, where there are just simply aspects where one Pokemon might be better than another, in which, you know, again, terrestrialization is open to everybody, so they could get a lot more interesting and tactical with that. Hopefully they do something similar with this next one. That's kind of what I'm leaning my hopes towards, but we'll have to see. If we just get a fun little buff to something for specific Pokemon, I'm sure we'll mess with that too, depending on how cool it is. And lastly, ending things off, we have Ivan Zone, who says, I would like a gimmick that turns every Pokemon into a sprite like how Digimon does, but as they are a sprite, they can learn moves forgotten by previous generations, including moves that were removed in the current meta, and their 6 current stats are boosted by 96 points, a nod to 1996. Also, all sprite Pokemon can get an enduring effect, sturdy, so they can't be defeated in a single turn. And the best thing of all, some sprite Pokemon can evolve and look like some of the scrapped beta Pokemon and even get signature moves. I think sprite Pokemon can be a fun addition to gimmicks and work well in the contrast between the fully open world 3D gameplay and sprites in 2D. I think the idea here is very fun, and given that it's like the 10th generation of Pokemon, I feel like that would be a very good nod to its 30th anniversary and just 10 full generations of this title. I think that's a really fun and neat concept. Obviously, it would take a little bit of balancing to make something like that work. I don't think it would be a little too crazy to give everybody sturdy just so we have an excuse to always use the gimmick and stuff like that. I think that would be kind of busted, you know? And, you know, the whole like 3D turning into 2D, definitely like a nostalgia thing. I know a lot of people would definitely kind of mess with that, but I think narratively, I don't know if it would fit thematically with what Winds and Waves is operating with. I mean, I could be wrong. We don't know anything yet, so it could be a fun concept. I just think that generally the idea is very fun. I just think it needs some like fine-tuning to really work specifically with Winds and Waves, or just, you know, specifically in general. Again, I think it's busted to just power them up that heavy. But, you know, it's a fun concept. I think it's really nice to think about it like that. I think that's definitely something they could like fumble around with and test out in something like Pokemon Masters EX, and just have like, you know, a sprite based mon that you fight with. You know, I think that'd be pretty fun, generally speaking. But hey, I mean, that's where I'm at. That being said, that about wraps things up on the YouTube side of things, and overall, that wraps up our responses for what kind of gimmicks we would like to see going into Pokemon Winds and Waves. Reading back through these now, I could definitely see why we might have had a little bit of an issue trying to, you know, get responses for this one. It's kind of a hard one to come up with stuff for. The ones that I read here are very fun, very clever. I had a very good time reading through all these different concepts and ideas for gimmicks we could utilize going into Winds and Waves. So, you know, I'd be excited if one of these came to fruition. I'm sure one of them will, but again, I think one of the things that we all have in common is that we have a general idea that we're gonna have something to do with like some kind of terrain or weather based like situation, probably what the game is named around. Who knows how it's gonna operate fully, but for the most part, we all have a very similar idea, and that's what we're kind of banking on right now. So we probably won't know until either very late this year or maybe very early next year in February. If it's anything like 2024, we might actually pass up on a Pokemon Presents this year, so we may not even know what the game looks like until February, or well, not what the game looks like, but what we are operating with by February. And by that time, maybe once they drop that trailer, we'll get a glimpse into what this gimmick can officially look like. Hopefully it's something good, hopefully it's something fun, hopefully it's something tactical. We have to just play that one by ear. But hey, you know what? Maybe that's just me. So that just about wraps it up for this one. I genuinely don't think I have anything else to say in regards to this. So I'm passing the mic over to you guys, and I'm asking y'all what y'all think in the comment section below, just in case some of y'all missed this. What do you guys think about the ideas presented here in terms of how a gimmick could work? Do you think that some of these things could work really well? Do you think some of the things you've seen here is interesting? You could be excited for the gimmicks that have been presented here, and that's something that you would like to see? Or are you opposed? You don't like the gimmicks that are presented here? Maybe you don't want a gimmick at all, or maybe you want a repeat gimmick just to make things easier. Tell me everything that you guys are thinking in the comment section below, because you know for a fact that I'm always going to be down there with you guys. But with that, yes sir, it does appear to be Skedaddle O'Clock. So I'm going to go ahead and do just that. I'd like to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Do me the greatest favor of dropping a like and a comment, and consider subscribing for more content just like this here. And with that, I'm gone. So thanks again, hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye! Like this.